Well, hello everybody, welcome to me, your host, Christian Watson. My friends, I stepped into some controversy, which is not unlike me, but it's not something that I do all the time because I try to be pensive, and typically pensiveness, well, in this age, pensiveness does cause controversy. I made a tweet in which I said that essentially I just argued that reproductive rights aren't rights. In fact, it's a misnomer to say such. And I'll read the tweet to you guys right now so you can see what I'm talking about. I said, and I quote, "Reproductive rights is a misnomer. Reproduction is not a right. It is a bodily function belonging exclusively to the female sex. Rights are universal. Secondly, abortion negates the function of the reproductive process, birthing a child. How can a right cancel itself out?" Now, admittedly, my argument is limited by the word count on Twitter. I admit that I could have defined some things a little bit better. I admit that how this argument stands, it wasn't necessarily airtight, but what argument is really not. It's not about these arguments being airtight. It's about me trying to find the truth. Although some people just like to endlessly argue to boost their egos, and that's not what I'm in the business to do. But I figured since there was a lot of controversy, and since reproductive rights are being proclaimed around the nation by many politically incensed organizations and many left-wing activists to rally over Roe V Wade, that I would address the core concept of reproductive rights. So let me just pick up where I left off. It is correct that reproduction is not exclusively a sign of the female sex, but the process of reproduction primarily relies on the female sex. That's one thing that I should have corrected. That's one thing that I will correct right now. It's also good to understand that when people talk about reproductive rights, they're not merely talking about the body process. They're also talking about a bunch of other social ideas as well. And so I will read what the United Nations defines reproductive rights. And then I will try to analyze that from the philosophical point of view. So the United Nations, during the 1994 International Conference on Population and Development in Cairo, the United Nations defined the following as reproductive rights. They said reproductive rights embrace certain human rights that are already recognized in national laws, international human rights documents, and other consensus documents. These rights rest on the recognition of the basic right of all couples and individuals to decide freely and responsibly the number, spacing, and timing of their children, and to have the information and means to do so, and the right to attain the highest standard of sexual and reproductive health. It also includes their right to make decisions concerning reproduction free of discrimination, coercion, and violence. To the untrained mind, this sounds good. And even to the trained mind, some of this sounds good. But when you begin to analyze this definition and what it actually means, especially in the context of what rights mean denotatively, things fall apart. But the Center for Reproductive Rights, which is a major lobby organization in America, they have several pillars to what reproductive rights are. Since it's a collection of different kinds of rights, here are some of the rights that the Center for Reproductive Rights says that reproductive health or rights are. The right to health, the right to life, the right to liberty and security of the person, the right to, again, decide the number and spacing of children, the right to consent to marriage and equality in marriage, the right to privacy, the right to equality and non-discrimination, the right to be free from practices that harm women and girls, the right to be free from torture or other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, the right to be free from sexual and gender-based violence, the rights to education and information, the rights to enjoy scientific progress. Let me say that again. The rights to enjoy scientific progress. So, again, the ethicist will understand the problems immediately here. The problem with reproductive rights is that it's basically a legal magical incantation that takes one term which relates to a particular political idea, i.e. the right that women should be able to have an abortion, and things that surround that, constituent categories that surround that thing, and loop together a bunch of other rights, which may very well be legitimate, into it to make itself seem legitimate. Reproductive rights is parasitic because it sustains by proximity. Reproductive rights is nothing on its own. It simply includes all of these different things which all have their own moral significance, which should be estimated separately. There's nothing wrong with grouping things into categories, but when you say, well, it's all of these things, you're not allowing the person, or you're not encouraging the person, rather, to look at each of those things independently, because if they deny one of those things, they deny the entire category of reproductive health. This is the problem with reproductive rights. it is a catch-all phrase for a bunch of morally distinct propositions. And when you attempt to make a bunch of morally distinct propositions seem as if they're the same, you are obscuring the truth of the matter. The truth of the matter is no one has a right to health. Because if you have a right to health, that means that you should be able to, you should basically be able to demand health whenever you want. Health is not demanded, it is worked for, it is maintained. You have a right to life, but you simply have a right to your own life. And you are not necessarily born with any one condition forever. You can be healthy one year and you can be unhealthy the other year. But you do have a right to your life and to maintain your life. But a right to health means, for these people, a right to demand services from someone else. And you don't have a right to someone else's labor. The right to equality in marriage. Well, once again, what does that mean? Equality these days is such a loaded phrase that I'm not even sure what that means. Well, I do understand that all human beings are internally equal, but what might equality mean as it relates to marriage? Does that mean that both people who are married do the same thing? Does that or does that mean that both people who are married have the same roles, or that their view? What does that mean? If it means both people who are married have the same legal status and are seen equally in the eyes of the law, that's all fine and well, but why does that have to be a separate right to the right to life and liberty, which in all reality, marriage should even be a legal institution, if I'm telling you. But it seems like a needless separation from the right to liberty, in my opinion. The right to equality and non-discrimination. Again, equality, this is a loaded phrase that they're not describing. Human beings are morally equal, qua our existence, but human beings do not have the right to demand equality from someone else. And non-discrimination. So that means that no one can discriminate against you. Well, we live in a society of choice, of contract. Or at least we should if we're going to be a morally just society. A society of contract will enable people to make decisions about who they associate with, even if those decisions are discriminatory. By their nature, they must be. And I tell you, dear listener, you may discriminate in your own personal life. Once again, they are looping together a bunch of things that sound nice and trying to call them rights, when in all reality, most of these things are not rights. They are either privileges or niceties. So the question must become this: what are rights? And why does reproductive rights do not fall into that category? Well, I'm going to draw from the writings of Hugo Grotius, who is a natural law theorist, who wrote a lot about the idea of rights, and whose thinking informs the foundations of the American constitutional republic. Mr. Grotius said, in page 138 of his Rights of War and Peace, he said that there is another signification of the word right different from this. He had described a previous idea of right, but this is the main one. And yet arising from it, which relates directly to the person, in which sense right is a moral quality annexed to the person, enabling him to have or do something justly. I say annexed to the person, though this quality sometimes follows the things, such as services of lands, which are called real rights, in opposition to rights merely personal, not because the first are annexed to the person as well as the last, but because they are annexed only to him who possesses such a thing. This moral quality is perfect when perfect is called by us a faculty, when imperfect an aptitude. The former answers to the act, and the latter to the power of which we speak natural things. Civilians call a faculty that right which a man has to his own, but shall hereafter call it a right properly and strictly taken, under which are contained a power over ourselves, which is termed liberty. He goes into a bunch of other things that I can't cover right now. So the point is this, my friends. The basis for all rights are the rights that are annexed to the person, and that is the rights that belong to us, as by virtue of our humanity. The problem is, reproductive rights confuses rights that belong to us by virtue of our humanity, by virtue of our nature, with things that are nice to have and may be associated with good outcomes, but have no moral significance as rights per se. Again, you don't have a right to health, you have a right to life, and under that right to life, you may pursue health. But to demand health is an absurdity, because all health is individual. How can you demand your own condition from someone else? It makes no sense. Reproductive rights makes no definitional sense. And what rights really do, my friends, they are things that allow us to live justly, as Grotius would explain as well. So if I have a right to life, that means other people have a right to life as well, and I am imposed upon what they mandate to respect that right to life and not infringe upon their life. If I have a right to liberty, it means I have a right to act. And therefore, I must also respect other people's rights to act, or else I impose upon them unjustly. If I have a right to property, that means that I cannot take someone else's property. These are negative, prohibitive qualities. Rights are prohibitive qualities. They are not permissive niceties. This is the distinction between reproductive rights and actual definitionally correct rights. Reproductive rights is incumbent upon the idea of positive rights, the idea that things are given to you. It is not incumbent upon the idea of rights belonging to your person, at least not entirely. Now, the abortion argument kind of gets into this area, and I'll address this in a second. So, the argument goes like this. Women should have the right to control their own bodies, and if that means aborting a fetus, that means aborting a fetus. And because they are the reproductive vessel, it is their right to control their bodies. Well, a few things with this. Number one, reproduction happens with two people, but reproduction, the process is primarily carried out after conception through the woman's body. And thus, it is a biological function. Now, here's the thing about this. It is a biological function. Here's the thing about this. Abortion actually negates the process, as I mentioned in my argument earlier. Because the process of a reproductive organ is to bring forth life. The etymology of reproductive, which was sourced back to the 1610s, says to bring into existence, again, produce. So the idea is to bring something into existence. Can you really call something a reproductive anything if it is not bearing any fruit? What are you producing? Some may say this is a semantic difference, but I think not. This is a morally substantial and definitionally substantial difference. Because if we're not producing anything in the first place, then the entire argument around debate has no moral basis to it. But the fact that you are producing something through the reproductive process signifies that the process itself is not finished until something is birthed from it. And if nothing is birthed from it, particularly by forcible destruction of that thing, then the reproductive process is not being adhered to. Ergo, you cannot call it a genuine, fulfilled reproductive process. Now, if the argument is that women should have the right to negate the reproductive process, that's a separate argument to make. And I'm not necessarily even making a value judgment about abortion right now. I'm simply saying, as it relates to the term rights and what they mean morally, reproductive rights do not measure up. This is, again, the argument on abortion and the fetus is a separate issue. But the argument on the moral significance of rights, that's the issue here. In rights, properly understood as properties belonging to man that are prohibitive, that stop people from doing something to you, not permissive, do not cover the idea of reproductive rights. And it seems to me a contradiction that people are arguing that you can negate a right and the right can still be a right. That is nonsense. Rights cannot be negated lest they be violated, and if they're violated, you've committed a moral wrong. So perhaps the question is this then. How can we separate the abortion debate from the odious and morally obfuscated term reproductive rights? Because obviously, as I have demonstrated, faithfully I believe, reproductive rights really have no basis in nature. They have no basis in human nature. They simply have a basis in society. And if society gives you something, if government gives you something, it's a privilege. It is conditional. And this is my final point. If reproductive rights actually meant something, then it would mean that rights are conditional, which they are not. They are inherent to you. If they are conditional, then that means that your respect for other people's stuff, their life, is also conditional. And that's not a society that would last very long if you simply respect someone on the basis of certain conditions that are loose and whimsical. And that's not how things. That's not how civilizations persist. Civilizations persist and they don't burn out. They persist and not burn out through cooperation and through the recognition of another human being's value, which their rights are contained within. So I would posit to all of you who believe in reproductive rights to demonstrate to me a basis in nature for all of these constellation of rights to actually be rights in the first place. This is not about, per se, abortion. This is about abstract terms that do not adhere to any concrete reality. And this idea of reproductive rights most certainly does not. Think on it. My friends, I love you guys so much. If you love me, please support me on Patreon. Patreon.com/officialcwatson or PayPal, officialcwatson@gmail.com, or please go to my locals, christianwatson@locals.com, or go to my Discord, which is in the comment section down below. So please feel free to like this video, share this video, and subscribe to the channel. It helps me a lot. I love you guys so much, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.